Developing right now, nearly a dozen people accused of domestic terrorism will remain in the DeKalb County jail tonight. A judge denied bond to most of those defendants arrested during weekend protests over the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center. And 11 Alive's Joe Ripley has been in the DeKalb County courtroom all day long following this story for us. And Joe, where do these cases stand right now?
Well, you mentioned most of those people were denied bond, Ron, but one person, a lawyer claiming he was simply legally observing the protests on Sunday, the civil rights organization, was granted bond by a judge. The rest now will have to try and go through Superior Court should they want to get bond and possibly get released. Protesters say despite these mass arrests recently, it will not dampen their efforts.
At this point, and the lack of ties to the community, I'm also going to deny bond in this case.
A judge justifies denying bond, saying the lack of criminal history for most of the 23 protesters does not outweigh the seriousness of felony domestic terrorism charges and a lack of ties to the area. What started Sunday as a music festival put on in protest of the future Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility turned into what warrants state as up to 100 people trespassing on private property, with some throwing Molotov cocktails, fireworks, rocks, and bricks at police officers.
A group marched from that concert to another location that was quite a distance away. It wasn't just like you step a few feet and you're there.
But attorneys for the protesters say the warrants are vague.
So there's no allegation that he was personally observed throwing a rock or a firework or anything like that.
DeKalb County Chief Assistant District Attorney Peter Johnson says domestic terrorism charges imply another felony was committed. Marlon Couts with the Atlanta Solidarity Fund says the organization is helping now to pay any legal fees for some protesters and says as those demonstrations continue,
we're worried very much about what approach law enforcement might take next, because it's clear that the social movement isn't slowing down. It's not getting discouraged or intimidated by these tactics.
Tonight, the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office says 44 people in all were detained during Sunday's protests. Over half of them were either released or faced criminal misdemeanor charges of trespassing. Meantime, the other 23, as we've mentioned, face domestic terrorism charges, and the maximum sentence is 35 years in prison for those domestic terrorism charges.
All right, Joe, thanks a lot. You know, it feels like it's coming to a boiling point, right, with the tensions over this proposed public safety training site. But we have actually been dealing with this controversy for several years now, beginning in 2021. Former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms announcing the proposed development, and later that year, the $90 million plan was actually approved. Then in 2022, we witnessed activists starting to show up from all across the country to protest the proposed training site. And we have verified that the South River Forest is one of the largest urban forests in the Southeast. Then in January of this year, as law enforcement tried to clear out those camps, tensions escalated, ending with the shooting of a Georgia state trooper and the shooting death of protester Manuel Esteban Paez Terran. And now, March of 2023, we're seeing what activists are calling a week of action. This includes several protests and rallies and concerts in the forest, which have so far resulted in 23 people charged with domestic terrorism. For more on those charges and what's next for them, just look for this story on 11alive.com.